Welcome to Medusa Pro, a 3D rock model generator for Windows. Basically what Medusa does is generate completely random rock models based on various different shapes and real geological properties. And it's really easy in Medusa Pro to generate a new model rock. So this is a rock based on the current template that describes all its geological features. To generate a new version, we can just press the space key, and Medusa will now generate a new randomized rock model based on the current template, and we can step through those random models until we find one that we like, and then export that to our end application. Medusa generates rock models based on an underlying shape, which it then turns into rock. Hence the name Medusa. And if I click on View and Show Shape, we can actually see that underlying shape here is just a cube. Now, Medusa has quite a few different templates that actually come with the program. We can generate a lot more as custom templates, but let's see how we can create a different kind of rock. So let's go to a limestone arch, and we'll just click on Create Random. So this is going to use an arch shape to randomly generate our rock model. So there's our random arch. Let's go for a new one. I think we can do better than that. Let's see what the next shape is like. That's a nice chunky arch. Let's try it again. And you can see each one of these models is very different from the last one. So there's a nice square arch. Now that we've generated our model, we can actually apply all sorts of deformation functions to this to change it in real time. So if I click on the middle mouse button to pull up the context menu, we can, for example, let's smooth the model. I'm going to put in a smoothing of 0.6. You can see we can actually smooth all the mesh, or we can smooth just the outer edges and corners, just the inner edges and corners. We can also choose to smooth it vertically, so the top will be more smooth than the bottom, or vice versa. But let's smooth the entire mesh. And there we go, got a nice smooth arch. You might notice that some of the UV coordinates have become slightly distorted by that process. Now that might be an effect that you want to keep, but if you don't, you can always go into the context menu and go recalculate UVs, and then that will now recalculate those UVs based on the new projection. Now, there's lots of deformation functions in Medusa Pro, so pinch is quite a useful one. So we could say choose to pinch the top of the arch by, let's say, 0.6, and you can see that's now generated a new shape. And let's undo that, and now we will twist the shape. I quite like twist. So twist is based on a user entered axis as a vector, and then I can say enter the angle I want to twist it around. So this will twist it around the z-axis, and you can see we can generate some really unique shaped rock models based on these different functions. So let's go back to undo. So Medusa can generate a huge variety of models very quickly. We can even add some details to our model. For example, we could bevel the model. It has a very similar effect to smooth, but actually adds new faces, so we increase the poly count and the resolution. Crack is a really fun function. Crack will add new faces to generate cracks that run across the model, and we can choose to make those cracks random. But let's do it so it's parallel to bedding, and I'll explain in a moment what bedding is, and just click OK, and now that will automatically add these furrows to the surface of our model, which are very much actually like a wind erosion in deserts, and also wave erosion sometimes, chemical erosion next to beaches. So there's lots of new features that we can add to our rock model at runtime. Let's generate a very simple model, and this will be part of the Medusa Light rock, which is one of the free templates that comes with the free unregistered version of Medusa Light. And let's click on Create Random, and it's generated me a nice little model. one of the really useful things that Medusa can do is generate LODs automatically, and these are lower level of detail models, and they basically just reduce the number of faces, and so we can make LODs completely automatically. So that one's about 50% of the number of faces, and these LODs are used at further distance from the camera in your final application. But let's go back to the high resolution model. We can also choose to decimate this high resolution model and interactively reduce the number of faces. So let's take this down by 10%, so 10% of the number of faces, and that hardly seemed to have a change at all. And it's a great way of optimizing your model for quality against the face count. Another thing we can do is automatically generate collision meshes, and of course collision meshes are absolutely essential in games to ensure that our player or any object doesn't can collide with an object. And once you generate a collision mesh, you can actually edit the mesh per vertex, and then export that mesh along with your model. Let's come out of there. As well as editing collision meshes, we can also edit the vertices on the high resolution model, and we can move around individual meshes, individual vertices, or for example we could select a whole bunch of vertices and we can do smoothing just on those vertices. So there's a per vertex editor also in Medusa Pro. Let's come out of there. So finally, you can also generate new versions of the rock templates that are entirely customized and change their properties entirely. So let's go back into the limestone arch and generate that model, and I can now go to show properties, and these are all the properties within that rock template that define the bedding and the shapes, and they're actually based on real geological features. So bedding, for example, are the layers of individual rock that in sedimentary rocks, so rocks made from sand and mud and shells, is laid down in layers one by one, and these are those primary layers, the bedding layers. And then there's also joints, and the joints are the fractures that define the edges of the model. So we could, for example, change the angle between the beds and the joints. Let's change that to 70 degrees. And now that's going to produce faces which are somewhat more slanting than in the previous model. And so it will change the geometry, the randomized geometry of that model that we create. We can also do something really fancy. I'm going to put that angle back to 90 degrees, and we can make the model well bedded. And to a geologist, what well bedded means is that the bedding, these layers that are generated when the rock is made, are really well defined. So let's click well bedded on the rock properties, and this will generate quite a few more extra faces, so it'll take a bit longer to create. And now this is going to generate a model which is well bedded, so you can see how much better defined the actual layering is. So that well bedded function is really useful in generating sedimentary rock models. Another really fun feature that we can do in Medusa Pro in the rock properties, and we can change the entire appearance in rock properties, is to add folds. Folds within rocks are generated by the enormous forces when, for example, continents collide, and Medusa can generate those folds and then apply them to that underlying shape. So this is going to generate an arch which has got folds superimposed on it in two different directions. So you can see we've now really got an arch that's really got some amazing detail on it. So if I now wanted to export this model, it's important to be able to export it to your end application. It's really easy to export in Medusa Pro. We just go to export under the file menu, and we can export our model for 3D applications, 3D editing applications like Blender or 3D Max or Maya, for Torque3D, for Unity, FBX models for Unity, FBX models for UDK, FBX models for XNA, and also X models for Dark Basic. And just for the purpose of this, let's export for a 3D application for Blender. I can choose to also export LOD models and a collision mesh, which will be automatically generated during the export, unless you've already created custom ones by editing them. And then we'll just click on Export, enter a new directory, and then Medusa Pro will export that file as in the required format. So just as an example, let's generate a new model based on the red conglomerate crag template, and this will generate a model of a rocket which is very typical of deposition of sand and pebbles within rivers, and in fact the red color here you usually get in arid environments like deserts. So let's make 5 different models generated by batch of this template and put them to a new directory and click Save. And now Medusa Pro will generate 5 new randomized models and automatically export all those models, potentially with LODs as well, to a new directory. And here are the models that were produced by the batch export, and you can see that Medusa also produces a preview of each model, so we can simply select the ones that we think are most appropriate for our end application. So we hope you agree that Medusa Pro can produce some really realistic rock models for your games and 3D rendering projects. Medusa is available for download right now. It includes a free version, Medusa Lite, that can produce an unlimited number of models from 2 different rock templates. Anyway, we hope you use Medusa to produce some really good games and 3D scenes.